My name is Valerie Brown, and I'm sitting here having a chat with Larch Maxey, who has just come out of 27 days in the tunnel at Euston, outside Euston Station. I have to say that in my life, I have known some quite important people. I've had dinners with David Bowie. I've spent time with Mick Jagger and his children. But I was never overawed by their fame and their success and achievement. They just seemed people that I admired, but they were fairly ordinary people. But Larch is on another level altogether, because what he has done over the last, I think it's more than a year, but I've known Larch for 2 years. But what he's done over the last year is like being a superhero. It's like somebody who climbs Everest. And the reason I'm overawed by it is because it's just something very few people can do, and he's done it without, to my mind, a shred of ego. It's amazing. So here we are, you and me, once again. We haven't seen each other really for quite a while. We met a couple of years ago when we worked on the Heathrow Pause action. And the last time I saw you properly, you were actually here, and we had a lot of journalists here, and we were all arrested in a very dramatic way. And you went into the garden because you were in the midst of an interview with a journalist somewhere or other, and it was quite extraordinary because, quite unfazed, you continued this very important interview by just running into the garden so that the police didn't get you immediately. You knew you were going to be arrested. You wanted to finish your interview, and they set the police dogs on you, and you were really badly hurt. It seems like your poor body is being put through every kind of pain and challenge, imaginable. So you've just come out of your stint, your 27 days in the tunnel, which is extraordinary, Larch. I mean, just talk about why you were in the tunnel.
I was down the tunnel because it's an effective tactic. Being in a tunnel, it's much harder to evict you than it is in the trees. So for 25 years, I said I wasn't a tunneler and I focused on tree houses. I'd been doing tree houses before, and then in '96 I went down a tunnel at Manchester Airport just to try it out, to see what it was like. And I suffer from insomnia, and it's not insomnia, from claustrophobia. I made the mistake of going down there on my own, and it was someone else's tunnel. It was really tight and just really freaked me out. And so I managed to get myself out of there safely, but it was so hairy, I was like, I'm not going to do that again. So for 25 years I said, yeah, I'm not a tunneler. But the thing is, tunneling is so effective, as we just saw. The tree houses lasted 2 days at Euston, even though we'd put quite a lot of time in them, and we had lots of people up them who were very experienced tree protectors. Whereas the tunnels, it took them 31 days. Today was the last day, the last person came out, 31 days to evict us, and caused all of this raising of the profile, all of this kind of media storm and public support, public outcry, and the drama and the tension around it all. So the reason I was down the tunnel is because it's effective. It's an effective way of getting more attention to the cause and delaying the whole project, delaying the destruction.
I mean, I know you've been, protesting about HS2 for quite a while, and from where I'm standing, I really didn't see that it was having much effect on the public or even on the media, because it wasn't being covered really, was it, that much, even though you were living up in the trees in the ancient woodlands. But you continued. I mean, what kept you going?
The thing that keeps me going every day is the same, really. It's the process of telling the truth about the climate and ecological emergency, telling the truth about how serious it is, the fact that we are now facing a very serious risk of societal collapse. It's so serious that actually if we carry on with business as usual, it becomes very likely that we're heading towards societal collapse, even inevitable. That's the point we're at now. We've got this very small window to change things and try and turn it around. But basically, we're heading towards societal collapse. That's what all of the numbers are saying, as Trump would say. You know, all the science, all the statistics are saying. You know, so it's facing that truth fully. You know, leads me to do the most effective thing I can do each day. You know, and for most days, that's a lot of talking to people, a lot of trying to get more people involved, and a lot of trying to support people that are already involved to get more involved. But that also involves, you know, taking action, like living on a road, like living on one of the camps against HS2, living, you know, in this case, down in the tunnels.
How long were you up in the trees for?
Well, of different trees at different points. So I've been based on HS2 campaigning full time since March.
Yeah. Last
year. And so in Crackley, that was the first eviction that I was in. That was a 9-day eviction. So there were 5 of us, and then 4 of us for the bulk of that time in one tree house, but also with walkways linking up to other trees for 9 days. And they were restricting, they weren't allowing food and water up.
Yes, so you had the smart idea.
So we did an action in Euston. Well, we did a national day of action where we had actions at 20 different sites up and down the line, but that included 3 of us going up a tree in Euston Square Gardens, and then some people doing the gate blocking in Euston, nearby to Euston, just around the corner. And that got some national coverage for the first time, you know, of our actions. That highlighted to me, the importance of doing things in London, because that's where the media are. It's much easier to get their attention if you do it in London.
Janet was telling me that she came to see you several weeks ago. She happened to be around Euston, and someone said, hey, let me take you to Larch, and you were all under this tent. So we all thought that there was just this occupation and you were under the tent. And then it turned out that you were digging like proper, you know, what's that film, The Great Escape? So it was a camouflage almost, right? What did you do with all the spoil, yes.
Yeah.
What did you do with it?
So various different things at different points. So, but the most effective thing, I guess, was putting it in the walls of. So we had the pallet. We called it Buckingham Pallets.
Uh-huh.
So we built this lovely community centre actually, where we had, I think we had up to 17 people staying there towards the end of the eviction, different bedrooms, and then we had towers with bedrooms in them, and we had a treehouse coming off of it. It's a very elaborate, sprawling thing by the end of it. But we also had a kitchen, and we had local, you know, the people would come, lots of homeless people, we would come and give them food and water, and set them up with tents and blankets. So that was the kind of base from which we did that as well.
Did the police trouble you during that time, or?
Since August, on and off, they did, yeah. I mean, mostly in the build-up to the September rebellion, because they thought they'd rumbled XR. They thought we were like an XR hub, like the October rebellion before, where they'd hit the XR warehouse and a couple of different XR spaces. They'd preemptively got them and got loads of kit. And they were trying to do that with us. So they ended up doing this weird like raid on the food bank just around the corner. Yeah, and the woman that runs the food bank and this other poor innocent guy that just happened to be around. So they arrested both of them. And there was a lot of police presence around the park in the build up to the September thing. But when they realised we weren't part of XR, we were separate, they kind of backed off a bit. And we were doing, also whenever they would get a bit aggressive or a bit in our face and rude, I would always put them back on the back foot, because I feel like we were doing their job. We were helping to make that square safe. We were working with the homeless people and the drug users, and you know, and trying to keep the square safe and tidy, and doing litter picking constantly and stuff. So we had a few meetings with different agencies through that time, and again, it's like really interesting to be proactive and put them on the back foot and say, look, this is what we're doing in this square with these people. What are you doing? You know, will you help us? Rather than just like trying to criticise us.
Yeah. So I have to ask you, I know you've said it many times, but what did it feel like really to be under there? I mean, it just seems like an unimaginable thing to be stuck in that small space. There were, what, 4 or 5 of you? Can you give me a sense of the size of this tunnel? I mean, I've seen it on the television, but...
Yeah, so there's a down shaft, which is probably about that sort of height. So you'd see the ground was up there, and then you'd come down, and the down shaft was about that sort of big. It's quite big, by our standards. And then from the bottom of the down shaft, the tunnels split off in opposite directions. The one that went that way we called Crystal, so I went to the east. And the one that went to the west we called Calvin. And they both went sort of 6 feet along, and then they both went in another 6 feet, and then did different things.
I know you said you did that 25 years ago. You went into someone's tunnel, but that was then, 25 years ago. I mean, as far as you know, has anybody else done anything like this?
Yeah, there have been various tunnels. I mean, I think the last sort of major one was 2000. That was so like with a lot of the anti-road stuff in the 90s, the experience was gained, and we kind of built stuff up. And with the tunnelling, yeah, the sort of peak of that really was 2000, where there was a tunnel that on a B road, which was a 6-week eviction. So in our minds, we knew that what was possible because of that one.
So you set your mind to being there for about 6 weeks?
Yes, yeah.
But did you kind of just say, look, we'll just take it day by day sort of thing?
Yeah, it was not about
see what
numbers.
We can handle.
Yeah, exactly. Well, also like see what's necessary. Yeah. It wasn't actually any point, it was really, for most of us, it wasn't about what we could handle. We knew this was the most amazing thing about being with that group of people, because we were all committed, all so committed about doing what was necessary. I mean, every one of us knew we could leave at any point, and we had a few people that did leave at different points for different reasons.
Before that, you were there for quite some time, but were police watching you all the time? I mean, did you manage to sneak out at night and, run around a bit and then go back, or were you solidly there all the time?
Oh no, we didn't have to go underground until permanently until the eviction started. For the first 11 days, we still had the drop shaft. So we could stand up in there, and we could do like interviews and things from there. But then once they got down the drop shaft and got the lock on out after day 11, then we were just limited to the tunnels.
And what about claustrophobia?
Yeah, what about it?
Well, you tell me.
Well, it's interesting. It was quite helpful last night talking a little bit about it with friends, because they were like, well, how come that's a thing? How come you didn't talk about it? And I realised probably what was going on is there's certain vulnerabilities you've got. Like the bailiffs will exploit any weakness that they can find. So I wasn't really open about my claustrophobia until I was actually comfortable there. So the first week was really hard. It was also amazing and a beautiful, powerful experience. I wouldn't change it. And the connections with the people was so strong. Even right from the start, it was like I just had such gratitude for the opportunity to do that with those people. It was just absolutely amazing and life-changing experience just for that side alone. And in that, it was very challenging for me coming to terms with the claustrophobia and getting used to being in that space. But by the end of that week, things got easier. I got used to it. I worked out how to be in the space and how to move around and how to manage my time and my space and my energy. And so then I actually found I could start to talk about my claustrophobia a bit and to sort of claim it and name it. And it particularly there were 2 parts of the tunnel where it was particularly tight, where it was particularly challenging for me. I couldn't pretend it wasn't a thing, because it was. So every time I had to go in those spaces, I had to really draw on my mental strength, my inner commitment and capacity, and just really consciously allow myself to feel all of the feelings that brought up, but just to relax and slow down with them. If I tried to rush to get out and panic, then it would have been the end of it, So I had to sort of just slow down, calm down, know that I could just stop, and if necessary, go backwards a little bit, rejig it a bit, and then go try again.
Mental strength. Where do you get that from? Where did you get it from? Can you tell me something about your childhood, about who your parents are, you know, what gave you this ability to be able to consistently be so committed to, you know, all the amazing things that you do that are just incredibly challenging to everything that a human being is. Where does it come from?
It's a few things, I think. My childhood initially, when I was young, was a fairly basic working class household. So we didn't have a lot of money. But I realised, you know, having rubbed shoulders with all sorts of different people throughout my life, I realised that I actually had a very privileged childhood in the sense that I had unconditional love from both my parents. So that stood me in good stead. Annoying as I found them when I was a teenager, and as much as I rebelled against them and pushed them away for some painful, you know, as an adult now looking back, painful years, because I look at how I was and it was about me, not them. But now, you know, I absolutely, well, for the last 10 or 15 years, I've had nothing but absolute gratitude and unconditional love back for them. You know.
That's right. They did something right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's...
But who were your parents? I mean, what did they do?
They're still around.
No, sorry, I meant, yeah.
They were on Sky recently, so this is incredible. So this
wow.
is... The thing that shifted my relationship with my parents was when I stopped making them a Larch, the latest Larch project, to convert or change, and just accepted them as they were. And then they'd always met me with unconditional love. So when I met them with unconditional love, suddenly it was like it all made sense. And they were actually received and seen for what they were always offering. And that was incredible. And that's a great testament to that, is the fact that just in this time now, they've stepped up and sort of desperately trying to help me in whatever ways they can, and, you know, always trying to be there for me. And with the whole thing with the tunnel and the dangers, the risks that the HS2 took with our lives during the eviction, trying to rush it and do it in a really bad way. So to try and speak up against that, they actually both went on Sky News. That's a huge thing for my mum. I just never imagined my mum would do that, because she's very shy and very averse to any kind of attention. But she felt she had to do it. So she did it.
Her son.
Not just because it's her son, but because she saw that that was a way of contributing to the bigger thing. So in a way, that was, you know, a good example of that inner resolve. They're not hippies, they're not, you know, radicals by any means. They're just ordinary people. But the kind of resolve that led them to do that interview, particularly my mum, is the same sort of resolve, I guess, that I bring to it. And you're saying, you know, where do you get that from? It's like, it's the same thing, but that's in all of us. You know, at some point, when circumstance presents us with these positions, people do step up. And we see it all the time, these incredible acts of selflessness and sacrifice that people make in all sorts of contexts around the world.
But I'm really interested in knowing, like, your parents before, I mean, obviously with all the love for you, didn't really like what you're doing? Is it because they didn't really get it, that the crisis is this bad, or they just wanted you to be following a normal career and just being a normal son who didn't sort of stress them out like this? I mean, at what point did they suddenly, what made them wake up to the fact that what you're doing is really worthwhile?
Oh, they've always felt that. They've always been incredibly proud of me and incredibly supportive. They've never put pressure on me to do a particular thing or not do a particular thing. So when I was a 13-year-old, I learned about the ecological emergency, the ecological crisis, and started getting interested in that. They just supported me in that. So they, you know, helped me access the information I was wanting, and you know, it wasn't coming from them, it was coming from me, but because they supported me in it, that's like that. So that was very, you know, important, that I showed an interest and they just supported me in pursuing it. Mm. So well, they've always understood the value of what I've done. Yeah. And I think we're all in some form of soft denial. So I think we've all got more to do in terms of letting the truth in. So I don't see that they're different from any of us. We're all on that journey. And I think it's just, you know, circumstances with this tunnel were so heightened that presented them with the situation to step up. And so that's why they did this interview, which is way beyond their comfort zone and what they would have done
Were
before.
you in the tunnel when they did the
Yeah.
interview and you
Yeah.
saw it?
Not only that, I managed to get a phone call to them. So that was the kind of feature of the piece, was they were like, they were filming for 4 hours, and then I finally got the message of like, oh, can you call? So they literally, the cameraman had left and was in the car about to leave, and I called them, and so he came back and they filmed me speaking to them on the phone, and that was a key part of the piece. For me, a vital part of it is I come across this organisation, it's about 14 years ago now, called Balanced View, and that's been like a really important part of my development, and learning how to deal with all of the emotions and thoughts and feelings that come up in life for all of us all the time, but so that I'm not a victim of them. And so it's been like so valuable, this practice of telling the truth and acting as if it's real. It's so challenging. And for me, I've got this background with this practice and with this support network, so that I can know that I don't have to be afraid of any emotion and thought and feeling that arises. And so that's been vital when facing the truth and all of the guilt and fear and shame and regret and pain that brings up constantly. But then also in a practical way, things like, I've got to go through that tunnel. I'm scared of going through that tunnel, and the resistance of going through that tunnel, and then the process of doing it is like, but I can just relax and use this practice and know that it's going to be fine, and I can deal with whatever. I think I've always had that as a child, that sense of strength, but also then this training has really helped as well.
Yeah, I need some of that, yes. What about your children? How did they feel? Are they supportive?
Yeah, both. So my daughter's really proud of me and really happy with the way it's gone. And my son joined me on the HS2 camps.
Yeah, I remember.
Back in April.
Yeah.
And so he's been full time with me for most of last year.
Yeah, so you must be very proud of him.
Absolutely, yeah. Just to see the way the camp. So I took a year out of my masters back in '94 to live on a road camp, and it was a life-changing year. And I've been in formal education most of my life as a student and then as a lecturer and a teacher. And that was the year I was outside of formal education, but it was the most educational year. And it's great to have that humility and perspective on the educational system and know its limitations. And now I just think it's too late for that whole educational system. It's failed us, and I really encourage people generally to drop out and get active. My son is seeing that for him as well, like living on these camps, is just see how he's changed and grown, and he's really become a man, a very empowered man.
Yeah. So now the big question is, when you're in the tunnel, right, 27 days, and I said the 27 is the magic number because Nelson Mandela was incarcerated for 27 years. Many amazing, talented people died at the age of 27, So I always think about 27 as being some kind of magic number. But what did you do about shitting, peeing, eating in that order?
Well, we didn't used to do it in that order, but so first of all, the first few days, because we were like really restricting what we were eating because we wanted to make sure we lasted as long as we could, we weren't shitting that much because we weren't eating much. The first few days we weren't that active because it was kind of this stasis of like, they were trying to work out how to get in the down shaft, and we were just trying to like settle into it. So it was this kind of weird sort of bit. But yeah, we basically shat in little bags. So I had a whole little routine. I got this little bucket that I lined with the bag, and I, in the chambers we'd got space to squat and sit up. So you'd squat in one of the chambers,
But what was the distance then, if you're shitting,
to each
between
other?
you and...
There were times when we were shitting very, very close to each other.
Wow.
There were times when you had a moment on your own in the chamber before you went and joined the rest of them, and that was like, oh, great, I'll do a shit now because I can do it on my own in a chamber. But yeah, we didn't always have that privilege.
Did it become just a kind of a normal thing that nobody felt anywhere about
and
it?
I knew that I've been in like tree houses and other situations where that's the case. You just normalise it. It's like you just do what you have to do in those situations.
But then where did you put it?
So then we would bag it up and pass it through to the bailiffs, and they would take it away. And it was actually one of I was always emphasising this to people beforehand because I know it from different experiences. So the bailiffs are always trying to get power over you and like stop your water, stop your food, and try and manipulate you and trying to play head games and try and weaken you and get you out sooner using manipulation and lying and deceit and all of that. Yeah. But one of the cards that we have up our sleeve is our shit and piss, because they don't want that over them, and they don't want it over the stuff that they've got to deal with.
Well, in terms of hygiene?
Yeah, so if we keep it all neat and tidy, then that's in their interests.
So what was the rapport? It's like, okay, I've done a shit, here it is, and they just happily take it from you?
Yeah, they would generally try
thank you, perhaps?
They would try and get you to put it in their bucket for them. So, you know, and I would generally double bag mine just because it's a bit less smelly and a bit cleaner. Using one of the scrap bags that we got knocking around. They had a system for their bio waste, as they would call it. Things can get lost and broken down the tunnel. If they started messing around with us too badly, that could have happened with our waste, but it didn't. You know, it was quite a funny story actually. In the other tunnel called Crystal, there were 3 of them there initially, and one of them did a shit and bagged it up, and then it went missing. And so all 3 of them were looking for it, and they were posting on Facebook going, has anyone seen our missing shit? And then eventually they found it in Scott's sleeping bag, and it hadn't been his shit in the first place. It was still bagged up and it was fine. But yeah, that became like the celebrity turd, basically.
It's funny because, you know what, little children are so fascinated by shit. They can talk about it endlessly, you know. And anyways, that's all very cute.
Peeing in bottles. And then eating, we mostly had tins, but we had loads of different kinds of food.
So you went in with some provisions.
Loads. The mistake we made was, well, various mistakes, but one of the things was, like, we didn't all have an overview of how much food we got. We'd all brought different food and different people had helped us. So one of the people that had put most time into getting our food wasn't even one of the crew down the tunnel. And we hadn't really, like, we took the food down and stashed it, but I hadn't been part of that. And so somehow we didn't realise until a couple of weeks in how much food and water we got. So we had way more than we needed.
I'm happy to hear it.
So ended up having been like slightly dehydrated and hungry for the first 2 weeks. We're then like trying to get through our stash for the remaining time, like eating and drinking.
That's amazing.
Our stomachs had shrunk by that time.
Yeah, so, you were struggling to eat.
It was quite funny.
Yeah. But I was thinking, when we first met back in the Heathrow Pause days, you know, I mean, I was completely new to all of this. I mean, my life had nothing to do with activism. And it's just that I woke up to it, you know, one day when the Extinction Rebellion, April 2019 rebellion was going on towards the end. And I'd been reading all this stuff about the climate, you know, collapsing and the dread, the horror that lay ahead. So I'd been actually crying all by myself for a long time. I couldn't get anybody to engage with me in trying to set up some group of people, you know, to try to speak to the governments or whoever. I was just kind of on my own. And then I heard about Extinction Rebellion. I came to the office at Drummond Street, and you were the first person that I met, and you were all moving out at that time to another premises. I mean, it was like your first day at school, you know, that's how I felt. You were all like these seasoned, you know, activists and stuff, and me kind of, you know, coming along, not having a clue what I was going to do. But I soon found my slot, and I realized that what wasn't there was that there were no black people. And I thought, wow, we're facing a global crisis and black people are not here. And furthermore, it's Africa and, you know, one of the countries that was already impacted, and where the hell were we? So I immediately felt a real sense of mission to engage black people in Extinction Rebellion, in the total awareness of the climate crisis. I got involved with Heathrow Pause, and I remember when people had to make a decision, not just to help in the sense of writing some paperwork or doing some pictures or whatever, but actually flying a drone. And I was sort of sitting there and thinking, well, I mean, this is really new to me. Maybe I should just stay on the fringes. But this idea that as a black person and as a woman, And at the time, there actually weren't many women in Extinction Rebellion either, as far as I could tell. So I thought, I'm going to do this. I'm going to fly a drone, and I'm to show people, especially people of African descent, that we must engage in this. So I put my hand up, yeah. So anyway, that's how we were working together, you know, me as a novice. And that was 2 years ago. And since then, I'm now running for Mayor of London. It took me about a week to make the decision to campaign for Mayor of London. It took me a week of sleepless nights, total fear, not understanding why I'm even considering such a thing. All I know is that, like you know, I think that once your eyes are opened, what I say is that you can't shut them. You can't unknow what you know. You can't unsee what you see. And in fact, all around me, my family for the last 2 years, not all of them, but pretty well, you know, for quite a long time, have treated me like, what the hell's happened to you, Val? You know, you used to be a normal person, or you used to have your own ideas, because as far as they're concerned, I've been brainwashed. It's been a tough, tough journey. And the toughest part for me has been the pain that I've caused my family in all of this. And should I just give this up and concentrate on being a mother and a grandmother, and especially my daughter, who's just had 3 babies in 4 years, who needs all my help. But I'm not there for her. I try as hard as I can. So I constantly feel guilty. My dialogue with her, my communication with her is just full of guilt. But at the same time, I know that I have to do this. And I'm thinking, well, why me? You know, what have I got that I have sort of singled myself out to do this? Well, it doesn't really matter, does it? The point is that your eyes have been opened, and you know that you can no longer just sort of go back to the life that you used to live. And you might have spent years sort of complaining about, for me, it was always like advertising. Why are they trying to make people buy stuff they don't need? You know, why are they trying to control us to be what they want us to be, just so that they can make loads of money? And the lack of freedom, especially for young people, in choosing a life of meaning. And it's hard to know even what a life of meaning is, but I know that it's a life that's close to the earth. I know that. I grew up close to the earth. You know, as a child, I just used to watch little animals going about their daily lives, and that was my entertainment, watching the formation of clouds and imagining all sorts of things within them. That was my entertainment. And I've seen my children grow up in a world where even a drawing is something they'll do on some sort of computerized thing, you know? I have gradually grown more and more angry, even before I joined any of this, that I just knew something had to change. People had to be free. And now, in a sense, I've put myself in a position where I hope and pray that I can play some small part, you know, in shifting people's consciousness, actually to want to be free, if they can recognize, and I call it chains. I say that we are all, in a sense, enslaved by corporations, by the whole sort of structure of society, and it's all about a few people, you know, making untold amounts of money. To what purpose, I don't know. They're now talking about how some rich people want to buy bits of the moon because they've discovered that there's more water on the moon than they originally knew. What do they want to go buy bits of the moon for? You know, sort out your stuff here. Don't go polluting the moon. There's a big story, a big journey, and we're only little people. I love stories, and I always think about my favorite movies. One of them, of course, is Lord of the Rings. Like, I read the book first of all, the idea of these few little hobbits who save the world. We are little people, and everybody is a little person, but we can do big things, and that's what I've discovered. And I wake up every day, and I'm afraid, I'm fearful of where I've placed myself, but I'm not going to shift from that path I've chosen. Do you feel those sort of things, or is yours a more
No,
sort
absolutely.
of...
I mean, fear is their great, the system, and those that are maintaining business as usual, and the system of power that exists. Fear is their greatest tool. So, you know, it's really important that we're able to come to terms with that fear, that emotion. We're bound to feel fear, you know, in all sorts of different ways at different points, but we don't have to act on it or let it stop us doing what we need to do. We can feel it, but then we can still allow ourselves to kind of acknowledge it and but still to act. You know, you wouldn't be able to stand for mayor if you weren't able to come to terms with that fear that of course you're going to get. You know, that's why most people wouldn't dream of standing for mayor, because it's too scary. And so it's great to hear you. You know, there aren't many, I don't think I've ever heard of a mayoral candidate talking about the fear of standing as a mayor, and that's partly why you're so important that you do stand, because you're a human, just ordinary person showing up like that everyone can relate to. And if we can create a situation where enough people get to hear that and get to see an ordinary person like them standing as mayor, who is scared of standing as mayor, that's so powerful. You know?
And like you, sacrifice is a big word. I mean, it's a word that you apply to somebody like Jesus or Martin Luther King and so on, right? But we are making huge sacrifices in our lives. I don't want power. I'm just an ordinary person, as you know. If I do get chosen, voted in as mayor, and I'll do my damnedest to get there, all I want, as you know, is to give power to the people through citizens' assemblies. And it's so, I can't tell you how excited I am at the idea that, you know, London would be this first city to run itself, that the citizens of London have a decision-making power. They run London. And even though I'm originally from Africa, you know, I've been here since I was 10 years old, and I've had an interesting life here. My parents brought me here when I was 10 with my two sisters. We were on our own. I didn't have my parents. And so it hasn't been easy. Like you know, I wouldn't have had it any other way. I've had to struggle through sort of, not too much, but being a young black girl in London. But I welcome all the hardships, and I welcome, you know, the fact that I came here in the 60s and all that I saw in London. And I know that London has a wonderful history, and the fact that it's so diverse, the fact that it's a big city, because cities are amazing for attracting creativity and people who are brave to come to the city. That's like going back, you know, centuries even. So London is a great place to introduce the idea of citizens' assemblies and allow people to do something amazing with this city and be this shining light to other places.
What's your timetable then on this mayoral? Because it's been delayed because of COVID.
It's on now, May the 6th. I came down to Euston a few weeks ago when you were underground, and I interviewed a couple of people. One young woman in particular really moved me so much, and she was talking about how appalling it is that the government is spending all this money on this high-speed rail. She said, who is it for? She said 4 years, you know, she was trying to find somewhere to live with her child. You know, the council couldn't help her because there was no housing, they said. And yeah, so she just felt very angry, and not angry because that's the wrong word, but just deeply upset that the people are not being looked after. Today, I spoke to somebody at Wandsworth where the people are protesting about the trees there being felled. And this man was a person who had literally no hope in a government caring about the people. So here we both are, you know, you highlighting the ludicrous extravagance, vanity project of HS2. And as far as I can say, well, it's helped me actually to see very, very clearly that my mission to create a city run by the people through citizens' assemblies, basically giving power to the people to make the decision about everything that needs to be done, or issues that come up like HS2. Let the people decide. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the majority of people will decide, as they have done already, but they've been ignored, that they don't want that. And right. So you and I are, we're in the same fight. And you've been underground, and my action is overground, trying to, you know, be the next mayor of London.
Yeah, and I see
to stop you having to go through unbelievable, horrible challenges like this. It wouldn't be necessary anymore. Yeah.
I mean, it shouldn't be anyway, but it is. This is where we're at. Yeah, and I see there are very strong parallels between, you know, your bold, brave action of standing as mayor or candidate and me being in the tunnels. I see them as very similar, you know, and I think that's what connected us when we very first met. I saw someone who was so new to it and very open about that, but had that same quality that I have, which is facing the truth and therefore willing to push any boundary that we may have that gets us in the way of acting on that truth in the most effective way. You know, so you were willing to just consider what's going to be the most, what can I do? You know, and oh, well, I couldn't do that. But then it's, as you've said, you know, you worked it through and thought, well, I can. And if I don't, who's going to? If I don't fly a drone, who's going to do it?
Yes,
you know?
Exactly. That's always been my attitude in life. You know, first of all, I don't take no for an answer. You know, when a university turned me down because I only had one A-level, not two, that I needed, I hitchhiked down to the university and I said, I want to see the head of English because I wanted to be a journalist. And they said, but where's your appointment? I don't have an appointment, but I've got to see the head of English. Eventually, I got into his office and I was a young girl, you know, recently come to this country. And I put my story to him. I said, I can do this, you know, I'll be the best student you ever had. And all he did was say to me, get out, you know, you have no appointment and so on. But, you know, I got back on the road and hitchhiked back to London. But at least, you know, I was there. So that's the spirit.
One thing that's in common is this Citizens' Assembly. I think that's common to why you're standing and what your ticket you're standing on as mayor, is to give it all to the power to the people. I think I don't need to say we've got to cancel HS2. All I need to say is let's ask the people. Let's have a citizens' assembly on the future of HS2, and I know that will come up with the best results. And similarly with the climate and ecological emergency bill, it's about let's put citizens' assemblies in the heart of addressing this climate and ecological emergency. So that's a kind of common thing I think that we
tell the truth to the people and let them decide.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's how we all live our lives, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, if you had to give some advice to people out there, people, you know, who obviously you're trying to reach, what would you say to them?
The cornerstone of it really is this practice of telling the truth. I would just encourage people to know about soft denial, to know that we're all in some form of denial and that we'll continue to be, and just to be aware of these layers of denial and just support yourself, support each other in working through those layers so that we can fearlessly and continuously and rigorously face the truth and have that as a daily practice, letting the truth in a bit more each day, but not being on our own with that, working with others that are also committed to that and coming together as a community to face the truth. That's the core of it. When enough of us face the truth fully enough, our work will be done. Almost, because at that point enough people were taking action in enough of a serious way that we bring about the change.
But I think that the big hurdle for people to face the truth is to stop being lazy, to stop using cynicism as a way to do nothing. In this period of 2 years or whatever, what I've learned is that you have to educate yourself I wasn't educated enough. So even though I was aware of certain things, I didn't really know, I always gut feeling. But I want to go beyond just gut feeling. I want to understand how the world works. And I think that now we have the opportunity to, and I would like personally to see people educate themselves, because the government really doesn't do it. And as you were saying about your son, how much he's grown by being with you and looking at the real world, you know, so people just have to, as you say, face the truth. But it's not just looking at life in the easiest possible way, just to go beyond that. We all have this thing where we look at life according to what suits us to see. Now we have to look at what doesn't suit us, what is uncomfortable to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's essential to do. Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise we're all done for. Sooner rather than later, I'd like you and I to be sitting here over a glass of wine, having a nice conversation about nice things that we're going to do, because we know that the world is in good hands, and it could be the hands of the government if they choose to do the right thing, or it can be the hands of the people. But the main thing is that we know that we're going in the right direction, and we can relax a little bit. That would be nice.
I love that, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's a dream.
Yeah.